Welcome to the channel Best Value Watches, where we look at timepieces of various price ranges and discuss whether it's really worth spending your money on them. Today we are having a look at the 37.5mm Pro Diver from Invicta, the 29937. I purchased mine from Amazon.ca. If you're interested, the link is in the description. I try to avoid third-party sellers though. I understand there is good ones out there, and Amazon does have a tremendous refund policy, but I personally prefer not to take that type of risk. So I filter to only see listings that are sold and shipped by Amazon themselves. Normally, when you hear the Invicta watch company mentioned, you may think of some of the more oversized statement watches that are 50mm plus. Many of those models being completely unwearable if you are someone with smaller wrists. Those collectors, it is a pleasant surprise to see a watch from them that is indeed smaller than 40mm. Another nice surprise is that Invicta has at least 6 other color combinations for this watch. One of the options available is also all stainless steel tone, but this one features a very nice blue dial. It is a bit lighter of a shade of blue than you would usually see on watches that are in this price range, so I think it really makes that dial stand out a lot. It really pops. I've seen some collectors post photos of this timepiece in the Invicta collectors group on Facebook, and in those pictures it appears that the color is accurate to what is shown in the stock photos, which I believe is a very important thing to keep in mind when you are purchasing a watch that is in this budget. Sometimes big brands can have stock photos that are off with things such as the white balance, which can affect a color's appearance. Overall, a quick example of this would be like when I purchased my Casio Duro from Amazon. Stock images looked like this. Now here's a photo as well as a short video that I took, and you can visibly see the color difference between the two. Moral of the story is always try to find real life photos in natural lighting when looking to buy a watch with a colored dial or bezel. Now when looking at the other color combinations that are offered of this watch, there are some gold and two-tone options. One of the gold variations has a black dial. It's actually the same black dial as the version we're looking at currently today, simply with a very nice yellow gold IP coating or plating. The other gold tone option has the same blue dial as shown previously. If you are someone that is a fan of the blue and gold combo on your watches, then this certainly could be a watch to consider. And if you are struggling to pick a favorite between the steel and all gold variations, why not take a look at the same dials of the black and the blue dropped into an amazing two-tone case. I really do like the black dial and two-tone case. I'm definitely thinking about picking one of these up down the road. As a bonus, I saw this listed online and I found this to be very interesting. The same two-tone case that was shown before with the yellow gold and steel combo, but this one has a silver colored dial. In the photos it does appear to have maybe a bit of a salmon or a pink tinge to it, but rest assured Invicta does have it listed as a silver dial. Now, when looking at the specs and dimensions of this watch, we'll start with the price that I paid, which was $84 Canadian. It's also available on the Invicta store's website for about $50 US. It's using a 316L stainless steel case and bracelet. It's using a Seiko caliber PC32A, the Japanese quartz movement, which they state will be accurate for between plus minus 30 seconds per month. And it appears that it'll cost around $10 to $15 for a single movement replacement down the road if that is required at all. There is also multiple versions available. The same movement is manufactured by different subsidiaries of Seiko. There is movements out there that you will see made by Hattori under the label of Epson or also under the label of Time Module Inc. or TMI. The crystal for this piece is what Invicta are calling their own proprietary flat mineral crystal, which I believe is what they marketed down the road here, as this is an older model, so I believe that down the road they have marketed this as the Flame Fusion crystal. and I think it is overall comparable to Seiko's Hardlex, which is just okay in terms of the overall scratch resistance, and I would say this is more than likely comparable to that. As expected for a dive style watch, this has 200 meters water resistance. It only uses a push-pull crown though, so that's a bit of a letdown that will be touched on in the cons section. This also has a screw-down case back, which is again standard for dive style watches. 18mm strap or lug width, which means there is a large variety of straps that would be available to fit onto this piece. And for some people, the most important measurement is right here, the case diameter, which a lot of people are surprised is under 40mm, 37.5mm to be exact. A lot of people are very surprised and very happy to see that Invicta is giving small wristed collectors a nice option to be able to choose from. This watch only has a 12mm thickness, so it's not too thick. It's definitely noticeable, but it's not too bulky on wrist. And for the lug-to-lug measurement, I do not have a set of calipers, so I was not able to get the exact measurement. This is just a rough estimate of what I believe it will be, so you guys can have a general idea of what this is going to wear like and what it will look like on your wrist. So I would say the lug-to-lug is most likely between 46 and 47mm. When looking at the pros or the upsides for this watch, I would like to first start with something I just forgot to mention earlier, which is the battery life for this movement is around 3 years approximately, which I think is overall pretty good. It's not Casio with a 10-year battery, but it's definitely okay. It's better than having to change the battery every single year. Overall, I would say that the case and bracelet finishing is quite good for the price that I have paid, which is $84 Canadian. I think this watch has fairly good bezel action. It's a nice clicky bezel, which really makes a nice sound when I'm turning it. The only issue I have is it's maybe a little bit slightly difficult to get a good grip on it. Solid link bracelets are always a welcome addition, especially on a watch that is under $100. And it's a very welcome addition here with these Invicta Pro Diver. As mentioned earlier, this watch has some very good and wearable dimensions for someone who has small wrists. And because of these very wearable dimensions that the case has, it means that it's going to wear a treat. This thing is so comfortable. I mean, for me, this is honestly the most comfortable watch that I have in my 10 watch collection at the moment. There is a very, very nice signed crown, but it is not signed with the Invicta logo. It appears to be signed with just a Swiss symbol or logo. And some more great branding from Invicta is on the counterbalance of the second hand. There is a beautiful little Invicta logo. Now going back to the bracelet, you can see that the clasp actually has 4 holes of micro adjustment, which is absolutely crucial for a lot of people, especially as we talked about earlier, people with small wrists who need those extra adjustment holes to get the right fit. And when looking at the case back, it is a screw down case back. It says all stainless steel on there, 200 meters water resistance, and Invicta 29937, and a nice high polish finish for the outside, as well as a more matte finish on the inside. One thing that I think many of you fellow collectors will appreciate is that with this quartz piece, the ticking it's definitely audible, but it's not too loud. It is not too intrusive, which I really enjoy. A lot of people, including me, do not like when a watch is too loud of ticking and you can hear it across the room. So when I compare this to my other Casio watches that are about a third of the price, it is significantly less loud with the ticking, which is exactly what I was hoping for. You can tell with the extra budget that they have gone ahead and put a nice solid screw down case back on there, which is helping to keep that sound and that ticking held within that case. And the Invicta packaging, or the box that it comes with, always pretty nice when you consider that it's on such an affordable watch. It's kind of a little nod, a little bit of an homage, paying respect to the iconic designs that Rolex have. If you haven't seen it before, I'll pop up a picture of just how nice their boxes look for, when you consider it's just a standard box that they give with all their watches, and the limited edition, the more expensive ones, come in even nicer boxes. I know we're not buying the packaging, we're buying the watch that's inside the packaging, but it's still something that contributes to the actual experience overall. So it's worth noting for people who maybe really enjoy the unboxing experience. When looking at the cons for this watch, first one that I would like to start with is probably the one that's been bugging a lot of you just by watching already, which is the second hand, you will notice, does not hit many of the markers, if any. At best, I would say it works out to maybe 10% of the markers that it hits, which is going to be a huge deal breaker for a lot of people. Going back to the case finishing, it is very good. I definitely appreciate that there's some brushing on the lugs and the polishing looks very good. There's a nice chamfered edge on the side of the case. I really enjoy that. But one of the things to look out for is the rough brushing. I do think it is a little bit too rough for my preference. I think they could have done a little bit better on the brushing. It's a little rough. It doesn't look up to the quality standard in my opinion. While we were on the topic of the brushing on the lugs and how it's maybe a little too rough, there's also a key difference, a key thing to point out, which is it's actually in contrasting directions compared to the bracelet. Direction of the brushing is horizontal compared to vertical on the bracelet. It would be nice to see if they could have matched that up, which it appears they have on newer models such as my 43mm Pro Diver, which does not have this issue at all. Now, having the appropriate water resistance is obviously a key aspect for a dive watch, but how important is a crown, whether it is a screw down crown or not? I think for this, it is definitely a con that the dive style watch has a push-pull crown. It could definitely have been a screw-down crown. They do screw-down crowns on their other models, their other variations. So I think in the future, if they decide to upgrade this one, that should be one of the first things that is changed. How do I think that this will affect overall the water resistance of this piece? I think that you should still be okay to go in the pool with it, but if you're thinking about going into the ocean or something with a lot of waves, a lot of movement in the water, then I would recommend going with an option which has the screw down crown. So I noticed that when I was on Facebook and on YouTube reading a lot of the comments of people and what they thought about the Invicta Pro Diver line, one of the main things that people seem to have an issue with is that the bracelet, they said, quote unquote, the bracelet is too noisy. But I do think that this is maybe a misconception and people think that it comes down to the bracelet being bad, even though I think the bracelet is actually phenomenal for what it is. I believe that the clasp is actually what is making the noise that these people are commenting about. I believe that it is because this is a cheap and nasty press clasp that is used on this piece. So it's one of the places where they did cut corners. They didn't cut corners with some other aspects, like the water resistance is still 200 meters, but with this, they definitely cut some corners by just going with a cheap press clasp, when I think a milled clasp would have only cost them a couple dollars extra, really. I believe you have to have reasonable expectations when looking at a watch that only costs you $85, so one of those things that maybe is okay to have as a flaw would be considered that this has hollow end links. Some people hate hollow end links, they cannot stand them. I understand that everyone will have their preference, especially when it comes to anything bracelet related. One little change that I think could have made the dial a little bit cleaner is if they could have gotten rid of one of the lines of text. Maybe get rid of the professional or one of the other lines of text that's there. I do think it's maybe a bit cluttered or unnecessary, and it could have been a cleaner aesthetic without that. Speaking of a cleaner aesthetic, I think a very, very simple thing that would have barely cost anything for them to do realistically is to color match the date wheel on this piece. If they went with a black date wheel, I do think that would have been a slightly cleaner aesthetic. and I'm not the biggest fan of the faux Tina on the hour markers. I do think I would have just been a fan of if they left it white. I would have just preferred a nice bright white instead. But the faux Tina, it doesn't look bad at all. It's just simply a personal preference of mine. I would have preferred to see it with white. That's just my preference again. I understand that for a lot of people, especially when looking through the dive watch category, they do rank lume as something that does affect their purchasing decision. For me personally, it is not a huge deal, but I will touch on it here. I'll put up a lume shot right now, and you will see that at first, initially, it's definitely got a decent, it looks decently bright. Not great, right, but it looks okay. And over the course of the 20-minute shot, it seems to fade rather quickly. So, might have been I didn't give this one enough light beforehand, or I think Invicta just doesn't use as strong of lume, or if they do, it's not a lot of it. There's not a lot of layers applied. As expected on a watch that is under $100, this only uses a mineral crystal, which is obviously not as good in scratch resistance as a sapphire crystal would have been. Another thing that is potentially something to keep in mind, might affect the legibility a little bit, is there is not enough anti-reflective coating in my humble opinion. There could be a little bit more if there is any. There's a little bit of a glare coming off of that crystal, a little bit of reflectiveness that maybe will affect how this is in terms of legibility in the daytime. Some collectors, this is not going to be a con at all. This may even be a pro. It may show in your eyes a sign of identity to the brand, which I can totally agree with. But this watch does have that famous, or maybe I should say infamous, Invicta engraving or logo on the side. If you're someone who maybe is not a huge fan of heavy branding on your watches, definitely this is not the watch for you. Speaking of engravings and branding, I just think that there's a missed opportunity here for Invicta, where if they were going to go with the engraving on the side, they have the counterbalance on the second hand, the applied logo. I think that they should have, possibly anyways, tried to go for the Riho/inner ring also being engraved. I think this was maybe a missed opportunity, but also this may be a pro to some people, as they may not be a fan of the actual additional branding. And original design is absolutely one of the most hotly debated topics of watch collecting. It is something that you have to make a choice on when you're buying a budget watch. What is your priorities? Do you prioritize a original design, or do you prioritize something that is going to do other things, like maybe it has a better crystal, maybe the water resistance is better, or some other kind of the specs? There's usually some form of a trade-off. To me, the watch not being a original design is not too big of a deal, but I can totally understand if somebody would like to invest in something that has an original design going for it. Some people, like myself, know this is an homage to the famous Yachtmaster 37 by Rolex. So my final thoughts on this piece, really quite a nice little watch here, very wearable dimensions, quite a comfortable watch. It's got the stainless steel bezel insert, direct homage to the Yachtmaster. So this watch has a lot going for it, but it's certainly not without its shortcomings. But I think that for the price they are asking, it seems pretty reasonable overall. It doesn't have the solid end links that a lot of people will be looking for. It does not have a sapphire crystal that a lot of people will be looking for. There's quite a few shortcomings to this watch that maybe will make it a deal breaker for some people, but I totally understand that because there's only so much you can do in this price range and to offer it at an affordable price. So I appreciate Invicta not overpricing their stuff too much and offering the collectors plenty of selection when it comes to colors and sizes. There is different sizes of this. I'm pretty sure I saw one that was 40, one that was 43, and then there's the 37.5 that we looked at today. So in conclusion, to me, this is a great watch, but it is, of course, not without its shortcomings, and it certainly offers a decent value in my opinion. And speaking on value, this watch ended up getting a 22.4 out of 35.5 on the best value watches value scale, which is all brand new. and will be on every review from now on. Here is why the watch got the rating that it did on the scale. Again, I have listed the Amazon link within the description if you are interested in seeing where I got mine and comparing prices with anywhere else. I strongly recommend shopping around, try to find the best price you can if this is something that you're willing to accept the shortcomings or the faults. If you're willing to accept that, certainly get the best price you can. And that's it for this review. Thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Leave a comment. Let us know anything we can improve on or any watches that you would like to see on the channel in the future. And also make sure when you subscribe to hit the bell. Otherwise, YouTube is not showing any of our videos to our subscribers. So make sure you hit the bell in order to get notifications whenever a new review is posted. And one last time, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.